Thank you to Niamh and the air quality team for inviting me here today. So we're going to talk about, I suppose, our experience with working with school students on citizen science and in particular on air quality. So for those of you who don't know, the GLOBE program, it's an international science and education program. It's a NASA program. GLOBE stands for Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment. It was originally set up about 30 years ago, and it was really, set up to gather some information, ground truthing satellite observations. And it was under the different spheres of atmosphere, biosphere, pedosphere, and hydrosphere, and how these are all interconnected. The science protocols, so the measurement protocols, were designed by NASA. So, and when we're all the different countries that are involved, there's around 120 countries now that are involved with GLOBE, and we're all measuring in the same way. So that's the key part. And, I say this all the time, but it is a great community to be involved in. For myself and the GLOBE team, we're really inspired by the community out there. And it's a very kind of unique sense of we're learning constantly from other countries on how to implement citizen science and how to improve what we can offer to schools. So in Ireland, we're sponsored by the EPA in Ireland. And, we have this bilateral agreement with the US, but we have to decide how to implement GLOBE in Ireland. So what we do here is that we align ourselves with the national strategy around the environment. So we can adapt, what kind of protocols we offer here, depending on what's important to Irish students. So we work on the citizen science element. We use the GLOBE protocols, and then we design some of our own additional measurements. We really focus on education in Ireland. Teachers are overworked in general, and the curriculum's quite dense. So we 100% support the teachers. We provide them with a lot of backup, a lot of resources. And then the more support we give them, the better they are able to implement the citizen science in the classroom, because it's through them we work. So we actually work less with students, more with teachers. We have really worked hard to develop a community over the last few years. So we've really only been running since about 2018, 2019 in Ireland. So we've rapidly been able to build a community, but partly, I was saying this earlier, that it's in Ireland, we're unique in some ways that universities and academics, they're very keen to be involved. And this is really special in Ireland. So we've had great support from a lot of people that are here today and from the EPA teams as well, who've supported us on our citizen science. And I have a great team that work very hard. So just to show what that means, so we have 4 campaigns that we offer every year. So we will be focusing on, on air quality today, but we would recruit around 200 schools, so every autumn, to work on air quality. And we've been doing this since 2019. Our first year, I think we had 23 schools. And now we recruit, 200 schools without too much trouble. And that's important because we open up this recruitment every year, end of August, and within about 10, 14 days, all those places are gone. So there's a huge appetite for citizen science in Ireland at schools. So it's interesting to note that. So as over the years, with the support from the EPA, we've broadened out what we offer to schools. And we work now on climate resilience, temperatures and trees. And that's, I'm thinking to myself earlier how interconnected everything is, and every campaign does actually relate to each other. And we have some schools that will work on all of our campaigns the same year, particularly motivated teachers. So that campaign, we have about 55 schools working on that, and they look at surface temperature, and particularly in relation to trees and the difference that, in our urban environments, the importance of those green spaces. We link all these things with GLOBE protocols alongside them. So we haven't forgot about the GLOBE protocols. We bring them in. And we send, kits. So we're sending our air quality kits out in August and September. And for this, we send out infrared thermometers and, some other tools to measure tree height and figure out carbon sequestration. We have just recruited over 100-ish schools for our climate resilience, rainfall and flooding. And that's where we send out rain gauges to measure rainfall at schools and then have a look at flooding at the same time. And for both of those climate resilience campaigns, we bring in a lot of around climate change, and we ask students to have a look at their own school grounds, because they're like mini urban environments, right? So they have a look at their own school grounds and assess how climate resilient in terms of temperature, in terms of rainfall, And those students that are then encouraged to implement nature-based solutions or at least redesign their school. And in some cases, they've received grants to actually implement some of those changes. And then finally, river ecosystems is looking at the health of the local river in terms of, looking at water quality and assessing the macroinvertebrates. So now to focus on air quality in particular, so we've had 11 campaigns since 2019. Around 650 unique schools have taken part, which means you're probably thinking that a lot of schools will repeat these measurements, and that's a great thing because often they implement small changes on the school grounds and they can have a look then and see have they had an impact on the air quality. And we've had a school from every county, so we kind of like to boast about that sometimes. So what does it mean? So we use diffusion tubes to measure nitrogen dioxide at schools. We'll send out a pack, and then it's on the teacher, so that teacher has been trained, and they ask the students to create a map of their own school grounds, and they have to pick 3 locations to put those tubes. And we ask them to pick kind of different locations, one in a heavily trafficked area, and perhaps one in the back area of the school, away from traffic, and kind of an intermediate one. And then the tubes go up more or less on the same date, depending on what's happening in the school. And then we bring in these other surveys, which include like the globe weather observations. So they'll have a look maybe at the wind, they'll think about rainfall, and even just that aspect of them getting outside. They're outside, they're connecting with their surroundings, and they're looking at the sky, and they're starting to think about what's in the air, particularly what's in the air that they can't see. And they also measure traffic, so they actually have to go and count traffic at their school. And then this really, sounds mundane, but I think it's really important when it comes to getting their results and putting them in context then, and comparing them from school to school. So the tubes are left up for a month, tubes down more or less on the same date, and then they're all sent to a lab and they're analysed, and then the students get their results from their school grounds, but also the results from all the schools that participate. And they have a great time trying to figure out the differences in which the worst school is and the best school, and making lots of comparisons. In a lot of the schools, they'll take this a step further and they'll create a clean air action plan, which is a really nice way to come and start thinking about how can we, impact this situation? Can we make a difference? And then they share their story. So often with citizen science, we have this, at least I did when I started this, you're really thinking about how can the general public, and in our case it's students, how can they gather information to help discovery of new scientific knowledge? I was quite focused on that aspect of it. But just taking a step back, and I'm thinking about all the things that we've learned through citizen science over the last 6-7 years. And really the data collection is just one aspect of it. And there's a lot of co-benefits around education, raising awareness, and empowering the students and connecting with your community and nature. So on that front, on the data, so I've just shown we have data on that map from 2022 to 2024, so that's 3 campaigns, and it just shows you the geographic spread of schools that have been involved so far. And the little squares they're actually just representing the maximum NO2 that was gathered at that school. So they're not directly comparable year on year, but that's just to show the kind of values that we're getting back at a maximum level. So the top, that red colour, is kind of over 25, between 25 and 45, and the lighter colours, the lightest yellows between 0 and 10. So we have thousands of measurements. We have thousands of measurements gathered. Students have access to these. They have the traffic count data. We don't house that. And there's been a lot of transport surveys done in school around active travel. So, the true sense of citizen science, that information is being shared, and we share it with the EPA, of course. And we even have some students at UL working on that as well. So just in terms of data sharing, like I said, that data is going somewhere. But all those atmosphere protocols for GLOBE are submitted, and it's just a snapshot map on the left of the GLOBE, the international database that exists there, and all the different measurements that have been made at schools. And they're just particularly relating to some weather protocols, but a lot of work has been done. Even just last year alone, between automated weather stations and students gathering measurements and submitting them to NASA, that there's about less than 200,000 data points coming from Ireland feeding into this database, which is great. But even more important is there's lots of opportunities for students to share their work. So they share it both as part of our national webinars, but we also, Globe Ireland, along with other Globe countries, we set up an international collaboration group on air quality. And now students are presenting their work internationally as well, which is fabulous to see. So on the education side, a lot of teachers have been involved. And like I said, those resources are updated every year. And we're like, being here is so important for us on our team, because we update it with the latest policy, the latest happenings, and make sure we're offering something that's, cutting edge to the schools, so that they are working on the same way that we are together here today. So that's an important part. But really, we can't state this enough, getting the youth, primary and secondary school students outdoors and getting them involved in the scientific process of going and seeing how a scientist works. They are gathering the data, they're asking questions. It takes that mystery away from science, and they have more trust, I think, in science, and it's more transparent to them how it operates. So I don't think you can understate, how important that is. And that's even not even considering then, learning more about the subject matter, which is also very important. But I think really just getting outside and getting involved in that way is great. And we ran a pilot just there recently with Limerick City and County Council and the EPA. You can see Dahi in the photo. And this was particularly on data analysis. And this is another really important part, because a lot of the time students can make graphs. They've been taught how to do that in maths. But it's very difficult to, that part of interpreting. What does that graph mean? That's very difficult. And then we focused on that for in-person workshops. And we had a successful time. I'm just showing this because we were blown away by some of the projects that we get on air quality. And we had a group of students that decided they had measured air quality at their school through our air quality campaign, but then they also took a look at then the EPA Clean Air Together, which is a citizen science NO2 project with the general public. And they decided to get on a bus, and they basically drove around Limerick. And based on the measurements they saw on the Clean Air Together map, they had a look at lichen as a bioindicator of air pollution, and did a little tour, and they basically had the question is, will they see any differences in how the lichen displays, or its character, its colour? And they found out that yes, it was different, and that they could use that Clean Air Together data and the lichens to come up then and say, actually, the air, what's in the air is affecting what grows, on the trees and on the rocks around the town. So I thought that was really nice. Okay, so basically all of this comes down to getting that cohort, that young cohort, outside, getting them engaged with nature. They begin to act. And this is the part that we have very little to do with. We send the packs, we train the teachers. It's quite like a factory, right? It's an orderly process. And then everything goes to the schools, and then suddenly you're getting pictures of parades with a horse and a community of people involved that you didn't even know about. You just get some photos back, you start to hear more stories, and the students making their own anti-idling signs, and the initiatives around posters and all these things that they've done in the school, they're the ones that are acting. Now, I know they're small, and it's just a bit, one piece of the puzzle, but it's really inspiring to see the kind of things that they do. So I think this is just a collage from our last year, but you show that involvement, and when the students are outside and they're doing something totally different, it sticks in their minds. So that message about air pollution can actually be brought down and remembered then, and they're going home and they're spreading that message then with their families and giving them a hard time, I think, when it comes to drop off in the morning. And lastly, I'm just going to say these results are used, around campaigning. They've campaigned for footpaths and changes and drop-off points and everything. But this particular action plan, which you can't read, I was really inspired by, because they had identified hotspots around their school, and they're trying to move student gatherings in the morning from away from the road. And even just that small change, it all makes a difference. So really, through this process of citizen science, those students are then empowered to be the agents of change. And I think, we can all take a little bit of encouragement from that. Okay, I went a little bit over, Dahi, sorry.